Hello and welcome to the Geeks Review. I'm Royce.
And I'm Joshua.
Today we're going to be discussing the horror classic John Carpenter's Halloween. We've alluded to it all year, all season, and now we're finally going to talk about it. We're also going to touch upon the series a little bit as a whole, and also the 2018 David Gordon Green directed, Danny McBride written Halloween sequel, which basically disregards everything that came before apart from the first and presents a story 40 years after the fact.
Oh.
So yeah, John Carpenter's Halloween, he was basically commissioned into making this, and he was barely paid anything. He was paid an exposure, which is something a lot of creatives might be familiar with nowadays as a practice. Basically, the studio came to him and said, we want to make a Halloween film, a horror film that released at Halloween, called Halloween because it hasn't been done yet. So he, with Deborah Hill, who was his partner at the time, set about creating this story. It cast Jamie Lee Curtis in her first film role. She was the daughter of Janet Leigh from Psycho.
The original Scream Queen.
Yes, Donald Pleasance, who had previously been in Assault on Precinct 13, I think, directed by John Carpenter.
And later will be in Escape from New York.
Yes, one of your favourites, I believe. Nick Castle, who would go on to direct such classics as The Last Starfighter, I believe, or Last Starship. As well as Dennis the Menace.
Yeah, it was Last Starfighter.
Last Starfighter. He played the Shape. He was Michael Myers himself for most of the movie, apart from a few stunts, as well as the unmasking scene where he was played by Tony Moran, an actor who was, I think, the brother of the actress from Happy Days, I think it was. Moran was her surname. And it's a very atmospheric film because this was just intended to be a one-off. But
they didn't expect what came with it, and they weren't prepared for the beast that they had created.
Yeah, it really defined the slasher genre from the late 70s to the 80s and 90s.
Exploriated it. Without it, we wouldn't have Friday the 13th. We wouldn't have Nightmare on Elm Street. The slasher genre did exist, but it
arguably started with Psycho.
It did.
And I mean, you had like Black Christmas and you had a handful of others that came out around the same time, but Halloween is really the one.
Halloween put it back on the map.
Yeah, made it its own thing. And it is a good film in its own right.
Mm.
And it's very...
It's short, but at the same time, it's contained.
And it's very tame as well.
It is.
I mean, you get a bit of nudity here and there.
Yeah, I mean, compared to, what would come after,
Yeah,
don't
Friday
do drugs,
the 13th.
Kid, don't have premarital sex, and all that.
Yeah.
But with this one, he's doing it because, I think it was the babysitter left him alone?
Oh, no, it was Halloween 1963.
Yeah.
Young Michael Myers, then 6 years old, murdered his 17-year-old sister, Judith.
That's right.
Stabbed her to death for no apparent reason. And then 15 years later, his doctor, played by Donald Pleasance, Sam Loomis, believes that Michael is a danger to anyone and everyone that he comes in contact with, and he escapes and returns home, drives across the state, somehow learning to drive a car.
While being in the loony bin for 15 years.
Yeah, he kills a mechanic, steals his overalls, breaks into a hardware store, steals a mask and some rope and some knives, sets about stalking this poor girl who just so happens to walk past his house one morning. And that's Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yep.
And the sequel went and introduced the fact that they were related.
The family connection.
Yeah, they were siblings, and the newest film actually did away with that. And I'm quite happy with that, to be honest. In a way, it would almost be like if they'd made a new Star Wars film that disregarded Episode 6 and totally wiped away Luke and Leia being siblings. I guess it's that kind of bigger deal. You almost can't comprehend it.
No, I was just going to say, wait, that didn't happen?
Well. But yeah, it's its own self-contained story, and There's no family connection, there's no druids, which would come into play, there's no incest cults, which was Halloween Part 6. My girlfriend, who's a big Halloween fan, wanted me to say Halloween Part 6, which was actually Paul Rudd's first film. After Clueless. He actually made Halloween 6 before Clueless came out. Yeah, that went and made a thing that he was basically the father of his niece's child, and there was a weird druidic cult, and it's all very strange.
Your mother is your sister, and your father is your uncle.
Pretty much, yeah. But the original, which we're here to talk about.
Oh yes, of course.
It's masterful, great music composed by
John Carpenter himself.
Very considered and deliberate, but very tension-filled.
You feel on edge. You feel what Laurie's feeling because you know Myers is in the background slowly creeping up, but he's like the thing in the corner of your eye.
Yeah.
You dare not look at it for you're worried that it's going to get closer if you look at it.
There's a great scene where her friend Annie is babysitting and she's on the phone to Laurie, and she's walking through the kitchen and Michael's just standing at the doorway, and then when she walks back a few seconds later, he's gone. And he's just always watching, he's always lingering, and there's a moment where she spills butter on her clothes. It's a very cheap excuse to get her in her underwear.
Yeah.
But she goes and she walks down to the laundry, which is down the end of the garden. They're thankful that's no longer a thing. And you're just thinking he's going to pounce, he's going to do something. She gets stuck in the window and the girl she's babysitting has to come rescue her. And there's just this constant feeling of like, when's he going to strike?
It's the suspense that gets you.
Yeah. And
it's a true slasher thriller.
We won't say when he does or how he does it.
That's half the reason why you go to watch these films. Is to watch the murder. Well, at least for me it is.
Well, Michael's great.
Michael is amazing.
He doesn't say or do anything. And the reason Nick Castle was cast was because he was friends with John Carpenter. And John Carpenter said to him, you've got a really amazing walk. I think Nick Castle had been a dancer. Or his father was a choreographer or a dancer. So he walked in a very sort of deliberate way. And he's sort of... He's not very tall. He's not the biggest dude. He's slender. He's tall, but he's not like the brick.
He's nimble.
Yeah, and he sort of walks with purpose. There's an energy to him, although people keep confusing him with Jason.
Jason evaporates. Michael just takes his time.
Yeah,
he's methodical.
Yeah, and that was very much an approach they took with the new one as well. They went and cast a stuntman, James Jude Courtney, who's been in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all kinds of things, playing masked characters. And Nick Castle even returned briefly for one shot. And it's kind of crazy because the mask is, of course, a William Shatner Captain Kirk mask, sprayed white and all that. And they went and made this new mask for the new one.
Yeah.
So the idea was, he's always got the same mask, but it's always like a different mask in the same one, like design-wise, and like he acquires it from a store, he steals it from somewhere else. In the new one, it's meant to be the exact same mask he wore 40 years before. So it's been sitting around in some, evidence room here for the last 40 years. So it's sort of rotted, it's sort of cracked and dry, but it looks amazing. And when Nick Castle puts it on, it looks exactly like it did when he wore it 40 years before. The new Michael here is much taller. He's like, he grew an extra foot in prison. And he's brutal.
In prison will do that to you.
And he does cope a lot. In the first film, that one, like he gets stabbed in the eye with a coat hanger, he gets stabbed in the neck with a knitting needle.
Yes.
And in the new one, you see he still carries those scars. He's got this massive, scar on his neck, and his eyes all messed up, so he's just walking around with one eye. First film is just tension.
It is beautiful.
And the characters are so well defined as well.
Yes.
I mean, you know who Laurie Strode is and Annie Brackett, and
you know who the dad is. The cop is like, there's no issue. Even though Michael drives by the scene.
Yeah, there's a great scene that where Loomis is in the foreground and you see Michael just drive past in the back. Hey, oh, Loomis. Well, that's the voice Michael actually speaks in. That's why he never talks.
I mean, Michael is one of those characters where he is synonymous with the word horror. Much like Jason and Freddy and a few others. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm focusing on the slasher characters here.
Yeah, it's... And I mean, they did the sequel in 1981, at which point Friday the 13th and other gorier slasher movies had already come out, so they had to ramp up the gore there.
Yeah, they did. They had to try and compete. Because you couldn't just have tension, you have to add the gore factor.
It was a stuntman called Dick Warlock who played Michael in the second one. And he's got a much wider head, and even though it's the same mask, which had actually, aged over the last 3 years, he just looks different.
Yeah. And
a lot of people say he's great, but he just feels like a lumbering idiot to me. He just slow walks everywhere and...
like a Scooby-Doo villain.
Yeah, he's just lumbering along at his own pace, He doesn't quite have the menace.
No, he doesn't have that, again, the presence of Michael.
The greatest scene, actually, I like in 2... It's a scene on a city street, and you've got a young boy walking down the street with like a boombox, and he's listening to the radio, and you hear like, you know, the victims of this murder have been taken to the hospital, and the boy bumps into Michael, and then the theme kicks in, and it just follows Michael walking down the street. And that scene was directed by John Carpenter, and it was inserted after the fact into the existing film. And that's probably why it was so good, just a simple scene of him walking down the street with the music playing.
Yeah.
But that's all you really need with him.
The music itself. Carpenter does great scores.
Yeah.
And I've raved on here before about the score from Escape from New York. The Thing has also got some great music pieces. But the Halloween theme, it puts you on the edge of your seat. You genuinely feel uncomfortable. Maybe some people feel comfortable, but I definitely felt uncomfortable every time I hear it. Especially watching the film, you just think, okay, I'm going to turn around now. There's not going to be any dude in blue overalls. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, we're going to have all the music playing in the background.
Yes.
might play a track or two in a moment. We'll see how we go.
We'll see.
The remake, well, it's not a remake. It's
continuation.
A continuation, yeah, and it does away with it all. And Danny McBride. I mean, Eastbound and Down and Pineapple Express, Danny McBride. And he's
Tropic Thunder, Danny McBride.
Yeah.
Freaky Friday.
Really?
Yeah, with Lindsay Lohan.
Was he in that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was.
Well, at the very least, he got Jamie Lee Curtis.
Hey.
The first Halloween film I saw was actually H2O, H20, which we've spoken about before.
Yes.
And actually played a few weeks ago as I, played some old stuff we hadn't heard before. And
I was lucky enough to be able to watch the first one last year.
All right.
Thanks to SBS's Month of Horror.
Yes. Yeah, it's a good film. But I remember when I first saw H20 when I was like 13 or something, like that's the mum from Freaky Friday. But yeah, they go and tweak the score. I mean, John Carpenter was involved again, and the score is just it pumps. It's really there, and it's energized.
Just builds and 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 builds.
The iconic intro as well of like the credits playing over the jack-o'-lantern,
or even just suburbia at Halloween.
And that's recreated in the new one. That the pumpkin is all rotted, and it springs back to life as the theme plays and the credits roll, and it's good. It doesn't launch straight into it like the original one. You got a bit of a cold open as you see Michael in prison, and the dumbass podcaster. Yeah, the new one it's obviously set in 2018. It's 40 years after the fact, and these horror podcasters on Halloween for some reason. I don't know why they didn't pre-record it to release it on Halloween.
Yeah, it must be something, to go live and all that.
Potentially, yeah, but they go and try to get Michael to talk. It's a very intense scene as they're out in the yard, and he's like chained to this block, and he's got their back to him, and you can see him, because you do see Michael's face at the end of the first one, and you do see him a bit here, and it makes him scarier, I think, to actually see there's a real person under there.
Yeah, not some faceless killer.
Yeah, and when you see like the anger and the hatred in the eyes, it's not just that blank face. That's more confronting, I find.
Yeah, he's not sociopathic. He's not lacking of empathy or emotion. He does because he feels compelled.
Yeah, and there's no apparent reason why he does it.
No, I mean, you look at Jason and you just have that blankness to him because he's constantly wearing a mask. You look at Freddy and you see he enjoys it. But with Michael, it's to quote the film, he's an animal.
He is.
It's the one thing he knows.
You wonder what drives him to do that. I'm not too sure if Halloween is currently available anywhere to watch. It might pop up on Foxtel.
It might soon. I'm pretty sure it might be released on DVD in the next couple of months.
Well, I mean, it is on DVD.
Oh, it is on DVD, so yeah, it'll be
2018. You haven't seen it, but it is... It's not flawless, but it is great. And there were 2 sequels to finally wrap it up, but who knows, Miramax or whoever's got the rights to it now. Blumhouse might want to do a cinematic universe and, whatever. But Halloween...
Cinematic universes. No, thank you.
Well, what if you had, like, Freddy versus Jason versus Michael, and then throw Scream in there as well? And then you bring in Leatherface or something. I don't know. They're actually working on another bloody Texas Chainsaw Massacre film now, based upon... the Halloween, but yeah, it's.
I'm good with the idea. I'm interested in the idea of a new Texas Chainsaw. I'm not interested in the crossovers. No,
it'd be a lot.
Freddy versus Jason is enough,
But yeah, the 40th one is Laurie lives in trauma, and Michael he escapes and he goes on another killing spree. And Michael, he's just a wild animal. He just kills. He just goes about. The guy even says he based his performance upon his cat. He just kills birds because he wants to, And when he does come across Laurie again, it's this moment of like, does he even know who she is? And then there's a moment where you realise he's like, oh, it's her.
Oh, you're still alive.
It's really good. On the topic of Halloween today, as well as horror films in general, one thing that is as iconic as the killers themselves are the Scream Queens, the final girls, as they're known, the female stars who really go up against these monsters and usually emerge victorious.
The protagonist.
Yeah.
The female lead.
Yes, of course, you've got Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode in this. Her mother was Janet Leigh, who played Marion Crane in Psycho, which is arguably the first slasher film. Kind of a highly regarded slasher film in that regards. So was Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, of course. Some like Friday the 13th have seen there's more, Popcorn blockbusters, I guess.
It is. It's a switch off your brain and watch teenagers get killed film.
Yes. But like I said, these Scream Queens are really quite iconic. And I mean, Janet Leigh's scream as Marion Crane when she's killed in the shower.
Yeah.
Is iconic. On the topic of that, do you want to sort of discuss some of your favourite final girls? Queens?
For me, it harkens back to really, there's only one for me, and that's, I would count maybe Ellen Ripley, but that's not horror.
It kind of is. I mean, the first one is. The others are more sort of action with horror things.
I guess putting in and slotting in at the number 2 spot Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley from the first Alien film. My number 1 would be taken up by, I'm going to butcher this last name, Heather Langenkamp.
Oh, you got it right there.
Hey, as Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, she's one of my favourites as well. Well, the story of Nightmare on Elm Street is, Freddy Krueger, or Fred Krueger, as he was known back then, was a child murderer who got off on a technicality, and the parents of the victims took justice into their own hands and took vengeance upon him.
Burned him alive, something about ancient demons, Babylonian crap.
Oh, if you go into the plot, if you try to make sense of that story as to why Freddy is the way he is, you'll go mad.
Yeah.
Heather Langenkamp as Nancy, she's fantastic.
Absolutely. She's determined to prove that, she's not crazy.
Yeah, and she's going to stand up to Freddy.
Yep.
So than others. I mean,
she home alone her entire house in the real world just to prepare to grab Freddy out from the dream.
Yeah, she does that in 10 minutes?
10 minutes or something to then pass out, call her dad and say, look, I'm going in. I want you to be ready to grab this guy in 15 minutes.
And, of course, Freddy does his absolute damnedest to make that not possible. Mm-hmm. So it's just her in the end going up against him. She manages it. She does. We think.
I mean, my favourite scream has got to come from the phone scene, where she's trying to call Johnny Depp her boyfriend. And it's just Freddy stuck, I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
And the handpiece just transforms into his mouth.
Yeah.
And, it's...
Brilliant.
She, of course, appeared in Nightmare Part 3, the third one, The Dream Warriors.
Dream Warriors, oh, God. This is where stuff gets convoluted.
Yeah, so, I mean, after the second one, which we went and had...
Yeah.
I cannot remember his name, but he was a fantastic Scream Queen himself.
It was a dude this time, and he was just having the same recurring dream of a bus.
Jesse Walsh, played by Mark Patton, who was... There's a lot to be said about him.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of analysis about his repressed homosexuality, because he does kind of take on a bit of a passive role.
He does.
In this, and it's up to his girlfriend, Lisa, that is, to take on Freddy in the end.
And it's Freddy's trying to possess poor Jesse.
Oh, that is a horrific scene when he does, where it's like he comes out of Jesse's chest.
Yeah.
And then goes wild at this party, killing teenagers left and right.
And, Jesse wakes up, he's got the glove on and all that.
Oh, yeah, kills the gym teacher.
Yeah. It's definitely a good follow-up. And then you get Dream Warriors and it's like, what?
Yeah, Dream Warriors is set a few years afterwards. And again, it's a girl played by Patricia Arquette, who is being haunted again by Freddy because she's living in the Elm Street house. And Nancy shows up as sort of like a dream warrior expert who arms all these children who are being harassed by Freddy.
Like this dream analysis expert.
Yeah.
Who in turn's taking medication to stop her from reaching REM sleep.
Yes. Which is actually a real thing you can get. I found out, which would be handy. I've had a few nightmares lately, which isn't fun. No Freddy, which would actually be more fun, to be honest, if Freddy Krueger was to show up in a dream. Just not real. No. Not real. Nancy returns and unfortunately meets her demise at the end of this film in a really... I'm going to say it. It's kind of a rubbish way how they do it at the end.
Yeah.
It's really in like the final 2 minutes that Freddy pops up and goes like, surprise! And kills her, and it's really frustrating if you're a fan. Heather comes back as herself in New Nightmare, which we've discussed on the show before. And that is set in the real world where she is...
Nancy.
Yeah, she's Heather Langenkamp, the actress who's Nancy in these films, but Freddy Krueger is still after her in the real world.
Yeah, it's Heather Langenkamp playing Nancy playing Heather Langenkamp.
Yeah. It's great.
There's some Tropic Thunder stuff right there.
Oh, gosh.
Dude disguised as a dude playing another dude.
But Scream Queens.
Yes, Scream Queens.
Friday the 13th has a few.
Yes.
I think the one that stands out to me the most is Tommy Jarvis. Although he's not so much your final girl, your Scream Queen, although he does have his moments.
I think they all do.
Tommy Jarvis originally played by Corey Feldman in Part 4, and then other actors following that. I haven't cared to look them up.
Yeah.
Because, he's a young boy who's obsessed with practical special effects and gore makeup, who uses those to his advantage against Jason. And, I mean, with the horror legend that is Tom Savini behind the scenes. But the actual, I guess, Scream Queen in that case is Chris Higgins, but in Part 3, but she's a girl who's had a previous encounter with Jason and knows of him.
The survivor.
Yeah, so when she comes up against him again, gets a few good screams in and takes him on, gives him that iconic, mark in his mask.
Yes.
With an axe to the face, and he keeps on going and going and going.
He's like the Energizer Bunny, but fueled by the blood of camp counselors.
Back to very quickly Halloween 2018, which we did discuss earlier on the show. You've gone and got Judy Greer playing Laurie Strode's daughter, Karen, and you've gone and got her daughter, Alison, played by Andy Matichak. The finale of Halloween 2018 sees these three generations going up against the killer, Michael Myers, and emerging victorious. And
also, they think.
Yes, well, the movie made a lot of money and was critically received well, so we've gone and got the sequels coming out.
Yeah.
And Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, which is going to be next year. Unfortunately, it was going to be this year. They finished it all.
Yeah, delayed it.
Which sucks.
Hey, I mean...
I was looking forward to it.
Yeah, I was looking forward to a lot of stuff this year too, so,
Yeah, well.
What are you going to do?
It's quite funny looking at this genre of horror where you kind of have these perceptions and then it turns out you've got all these strong characters, these strong role models. And it's something I think anyone can appreciate. Of course, I don't know what I'm saying. Horror is an acquired taste, I found. And
yes, it takes a while.
I mean, I certainly like more horror than others.
Not for me, unfortunately. I mean, I like my horror, but not as much as the next guy.
If it's Russian, no, and set during World War II, that's your bag.
Yeah, that's my bag. If it's world film, that's me.
Hereditary, though, that was too much for me.
Yeah.
I liked it for the most part.
My sister's more into horror than I am. So,
really?
Yeah, the 15-year-old of all people.
Get her on the show, maybe.
Yeah, I'll kidnap her one day,
And I guess dishonourable mentions in regards to Scream Queen. I can't remember her name, but the final girl of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, who screams non-stop for a good 20 minutes while Leatherface is chasing her down. That was enough to put me off.
Yeah.
You want to have a balance of, you don't want them to scream too much because
it's
then
like
you're rooting
Willie
for the killer.
Scott in Temple of Doom.
Well, I mean, if you want to go down that route, there's so many other Scream Queens outside the horror genre in of itself. Or Temple of Doom is arguably very horror.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it. I was going to say, hang on, I do have a Scream King, but he's more, I wouldn't say less of a, I was going to say Bruce Campbell originally.
Yes. And of course, I was even just thinking then, Empire Strikes Back, you got a pretty good scream from Carrie Fisher then when the Minoc creatures attack. Which then reminds me of the TV show Scream Queens, which I haven't seen, which has Billie Lourd, her daughter, alongside Emma Roberts, who, is also in Scream 4.
Oh, yeah.
It all ties together. It's
all connected.
Speaking of which, Carrie Fisher is also in Scream 3, so how about that?
Yeah, how about that for you?
But anyway, that's been our rambling discussion.
Yeah, rambling.
A trek down the horror
rabbit hole.
Horror rabbit hole. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll be back next week with another horror classic, just purely coincidental there. I'm Royce.
I'm Joshua.
And we'll see you next time.